Janome.
Hello, my name is Sam Fung, Janome Educator. Welcome to our holiday open house. Today I'm going to show you how we can turn our Christmas holiday cookie cutters into raw edge applique using the Memorycraft 9480 QCP. To start off, let's go over all the tools and items that is needed for this project. One of the main things that you will need are cookie cutters. Now, there are a variety of shapes and types available to use. What you want to look for is something with simple lines, curves, and shapes depending on your skill level. If you are a beginner and new to this, you probably wouldn't want to use something like this. This is a snowflake. As you notice, there are lots of sharp points and curves, whereas something like this gingerbread man, you have a lot more simple curves. It makes it a lot easier to do. Or you might want to pick something like a simple shape that's easily recognizable, like this candy cane. Something simple like that we'll use. Now, the next thing you will need to use is fabric. What I have used here is an assortment of fat quarters. Most of these fabric is leftover that I have from a project I've used in the past. As you can see, I have multiple different colors of holiday fabric, and you can see all of them right here, different colors, different prints, just whatever you want to use you can do. It doesn't have to be a print, it can be solids, it can be scraps. So just a lot of different things like that. The other thing you would need is some type of fusible, and because this is a raw edge applique, you will need to first fuse the fusible web into the back of the applique before cutting it out. So you will need some kind of fusible applique that has a paper backing to it so you can trace the design off on it. Not only that, you will need something like buttons for the eyes and the mouths. You will need something like rickrack, different size of trim, all different types of trimming to use, different colors depending on your fabric choices. The other thing you would need is some kind of scissors. You would need scissors to be able to cut out your applique. And also, I also recommend having some sharp scissors like these with a nice small point. I'm using some sharp small point scissors because if you're doing smaller applique like so, you may want to use the smaller scissors to get into the center points because you want to be able to use the point of the scissors and not the bottom part of the scissors where you might cut too far. As you can see, I have multiples of these here. Other than that, you will need ironing press, pen, paper. These are all stuff that people have around the house. If you have access to a printer, I do suggest that you trace your cookie cutters off onto a piece of paper, scan it or take a picture of it into your computer, and that way you can resize it to whatever you plan to put the applique on. For example, the tablecloth that I put it on, you can see the appliques are larger, and on the napkin you can see that the gingerbread men, it's a lot smaller size. Now those were enlarged and reduced on the copier. For me, it was much easier to reduce it or enlarge it on my copier as to do it on the computer. But this is based on your skill level, how comfortable you are, and what you have access to. And I think I covered the basics of what you would need. So let's set up the machine and let's start stitching. Although I'm using the 9480 today, there are multiple machines in our line that has this function, and that is the sewing application function. So on the screen, sewing application is the t-shirt right here. We would go and touch the t-shirt. In sewing application, depending on your machine, the very first button is the sewing application for regular sewing like garment sewing. The second one is for quilting application. And since we are doing raw edge applique, we need to go into the quilting application. So I'm going to touch the heart with the two feathers next to it. And as you can see up here on my screen, I'm going in the quilt application. In the quilting application, on my screen right here, we have Appliqué. On your machine, depending on the machine, you may have to turn the page until you find Appliqué. So select Appliqué. In the Appliqué, right here, you can see we have M's and R. That means where the needle drop is. M means the middle of the foot, the center of the foot, so center drop. R means the foot drops to the right of the foot. Now we have Appliqué 1 and at blanket stitch number 1. I'm going to select blanket stitch number 1. The reason I'm using number 1 is because I like it. It's a smaller bite and a smaller stitch length because we're going to be doing a lot of turns and stuff like that on our applique, and having a smaller bite, it makes it a lot easier. Now I'm doing this because of the shape and how much turning we're going to do. If we're doing a big bite or a long stitch, it's not going to look as nice. It's a little bit more difficult to do. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight the cornering feature, which is this button right here on the screen. You can see has a corner. I just touched that, and you see now we have the cornering feature is up on our display window. Now the other thing I'm going to highlight is the foot up feature, which is this button right here. When I touch it on this machine, it turns blue. Some of your machines, this button will turn yellow depending on the model you're on, but they still do the same thing. And what this does is when this is activated, every time you stop, the needle will be in the down position, the foot will automatically raise so you can pivot. Some people call this a auto pivot function, but this is actually called the foot up function. So right here we have the cornering feature, and what this does is every time I stop, if I need to get to a corner and I stop and I would touch this button, and what will happen is the stitch will automatically cycle to the very first stitch before it takes the bite. So it doesn't matter where in the process you are, the machine will automatically take 2 stitches forward before it takes the bite. So just that, very important to remember that. The other thing is when you stop, you need to make sure your needle is on the right side of the swing and not on the left. If it's on the left side, you need to make 1 more stitch to make it to the right. Now, some other things I want to point out on my screen right here. You can see the default bite or the stitch width is 2.0 and the default stitch length is 1.50 on this machine. On most of the machine, it is the same thing. For those of you who don't have a machine that has an auto lift system or do not have sewing application, you can still choose a blanket stitch. You would just need to manually adjust your stitch width and your stitch length to what it is here. Now that we're all set up, let's start sewing. Before we start sewing, I just want to point out that my machine may look a little bit different than yours. That's because I'm using the optional spool stand for the 9480. The reason I'm using the optional spool stand is because my cone right here This is a cone style thread. With a cone style thread, it is meant to be dispensed vertically. So if you're using a cone style thread, you actually would want this thread to be dispensed vertically versus horizontally. This is an optional add-on for the 9480. And what you do is you just thread it through the thread stand. It comes to the front of the machine, and you just thread it through like you would normally do. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's start. Okay, looking at my foot, you can see I have put on the F2 open toe foot. I prefer this foot as opposed to the F foot. I find it a lot easier to watch my needle while I'm sewing. It's a personal preference. If you prefer to use the other foot, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is when you're starting to sew, you don't want to start at the corner like right here. What you want to do is start somewhere down a little bit, because it's very hard to start and stop at the corner and have where this bite looks good. Okay, so we're going to start off at the bottom right here. I'm going to move this right here. I'm going to turn my hand wheels and check where my needle drop is. You want the needle to drop right on the edge of the applique, like so. Now that I know it's going to drop right here, I'm going to lower my pressure foot and I'm going to start sewing. Now I have my speed slider slow down quite a bit because I'm going to be doing some turnings and stopping. I'm going to try to eliminate the stopping as much as possible. Now here it is. See, I'm going at a medium speed. My straight stitches are on the fabric itself, and the bite is on the applique. Now, as I make this turn, okay, after it takes this bite right here, I stop, and you notice my foot automatically raised up to allow me to pivot. So I'm just going to pivot a little bit, continuing my sewing, as you can see, and then just pivoting as I need to. Having this auto pivot function is so nice. So for those of you who don't have this function on your machine, another thing you have, if you have it that comes with your machine, where most of our machine does, it comes with a knee lift. So when you stop, you can always use your knee lift to raise the foot up. Okay? If you don't have a knee lift and you're using a smaller machine, let's say you're using a travel type machine that don't have a knee lift, then what you would do is you would make sure your needle ends up in a down position and manually raise the foot pressure up and pivot. Okay? Now that I'm getting close to the center point, okay, right here, as you guys can see, I'm almost getting to the middle right here, and that's where it takes a bite right here. Now, after that bite, I make sure that my needle is over to the right. I can pivot, and then I'm going to come to my machine. I'm going to touch that start over key that we talked about earlier. Now that you watch, the machine's going to take two stitches forward. I'm going to pivot again, and now it's going to take the bite. See that? And then it's going to continue forward again. And then now I can continue my stitch. Now I'm using a 50 weight cotton quilting thread. As you can see, this thread shows up quite a bit on the applique. If you prefer it not to show up as much, you may want to use something like a lighter weight thread. This is a 50 weight. The higher the number, the thinner your thread will be. And if you're not that good at doing applique and this is your first time, you may want to go and find something that's more matching, closer to the color of your applique. For example, for doing something like this, you may want to use a brown color, okay? Or it's up to you. If you want to show up, use a lower number, and it will kind of look like icing that you would decorate these cookies with. So there's lots of options available to you. Okay. And we're just going to go around the applique again. And as you can see, when we get to the point right here, after it takes this bite, I want to make sure my needle's on the right. I'm going to press the start over key. I'm going to pivot. The foot is up. And here's where it takes the 2 bite, 2 straights forward before it takes the bite. As you can see, when it comes to these curves, you have to slow down just a little bit to get all the way around the applique. Okay, as you can see, we're getting close to the end. As you can see, the applique almost match up almost exactly right here. Now, since I'm right here and I want to tie this off, what I'm going to do is to have an immediate tie off. Instead of letting it finish the stitch, I'm touching my reverse key on the machine, stepping on the foot control. As you can see, it automatically just makes those 3 small stitches to put the knot in place so it can't be pulled out. So I'm going to use my scissor key to cut it, and there it is. As you can see how perfect it is. It's almost a perfect match where you couldn't really see or tell where I started and ended. Now that we're finished with sewing, now the fun part can begin, and that's decorating our applique. So let me show you right here. We just finished this up. We finished stitching it, and we can decorate him. So how I do this is, just like instead of using icing, we can use our trim. Any trim, whatever you like. This is rickrack, and it comes in different sizes. You have some small rickrack, large rickrack. You can use braided trims. You can use anything you want. I like using the wider rickrack to place it on the arms, just like you would on decorating cookies. And what I do is, I would place this trim here, take your scissors, and then cut off what you would need right up to the edge, like so. Measure him out so you can figure out where you're going to place the rickrack and then cut it out. After you do that, this is personal preference. You can either use a fabric glue and glue the rickrack down, or sew it by machine. For something that you're using the holiday maybe just once or twice during the holiday season, I don't see why you really need to sew it down that well. If it's a garment, something that you plan to wash and you plan to use it year after year and things like that, you may want to sew it down, but again, this is personal preference. If you are going to glue this down, I would suggest you use a fabric glue like fabric tack. That's what I used on my projects. And then the other thing is buttons. I use the buttons for the eyes. Now, the buttons are quite small, as you can see here, so what I use is a pair of tweezers to pick up the buttons, and then you can place them on the applique wherever you want them to go. For example, like right here. Now, with the buttons being this small, I find it's very difficult to sew by machine, and I'm not one of those to sit here and trying to sew through all that fusible on the applique, because it's a winter time and I'm at that age where arthritis sets in. Maybe some of you guys have to same feeling too. So I just glued the eyes on, and then you can use some bigger buttons and put down the front or whatever you want. You don't have to stick with white. I used a white one because I just find it more traditional, like white icing. And if you want to, you use pink, blue, whatever color that suits you fancy. I mean, you have all kinds of choices. You don't have to use rickrack. There's all kinds of trims out there that you can use. So have fun and do what you would like to do. Today I showed you on how to do the gingerbread man because I find that is probably the most traditional Christmas cookie shape out there, but there are so many other ones you can do. For example, there is this stocking that you can do. And with the stocking, what I did was I used some of the other fabric to do the toe, and then another piece of applique that I fused onto the main body to do the cuff part of just to set it apart. And if you notice, I did not go into here and do the blanket stitch. I didn't feel that was necessary, but if you would like to, you most certainly can. And look, you can put them on aprons. I also did the Christmas trees. You can see right here, the Christmas tree, I used a smaller red rickrack to put it on here. You can get really fancy with it if you want to. You can get some rhinestones and stick it on here just to make it look like more, glittery, like you would do putting on cookies and things like that. Here I'm showing you example of an apron. And I just did this on the purchase apron. I did the embroidery on it, but we are talking about sewing applique. So hopefully this will give you an idea what you can do with all the different shapes that is available to you. Thank you for joining me today. Visit your local Janome dealer to get more information on the Memory Craft 9480 and the Holiday Open House special pricing and promotions. Happy sewing!